In the 70s, Australia's muscle car war got out of control. Ford and Holden were building street cars that had no business being on the road. These weren't just fast, they were dangerous. Some could outrun police, others were so unstable at high speeds they were death traps on wheels. And then there were the ones that got banned before they even hit the showroom. This is the story of Australia's most extreme homologation specials. The ones that won, the ones that lost, and the ones that were too wild to survive. Number 1. Ford Falcon XR GT. In 1967, Ford Australia built a car with one goal: to win at Bathurst. The Falcon XR GT was the country's first true touring car homologation special. It looked like an ordinary family sedan, but under the hood was a 289 cubic inch Windsor V8 tuned to 225 horsepower. That was 10% more than the standard Falcon. A close ratio 4-speed gearbox and a limited slip differential gave it better control, while stiffer suspension and upgraded brakes made sure it could handle long races. Painted in striking GT gold with bold stripes, the XR GT stood out on the road. Inside, it borrowed styling cues from the Mustang, giving it a sportier feel. Ford's plan was simple: win on Sunday, sell on Monday. The Bathurst 500 was the biggest test, and the XR GT passed with flying colours. In 1967, Harry Firth and Fred Gibson drove one to victory, making it the first V8-powered car to win at Mount Panorama. The Bathurst winning car wasn't gold, it was ivy green. 2. Holden Monaro GTS 327 and 350. Holden answered back in 1968 with the HK Monaro GTS 327, a two-door coupe built for speed. It was designed from the start to house Chevrolet's V8, and for Bathurst, Holden stuffed in a 327 cubic inch engine, making over 250 horsepower. The GTS 327 looked every bit as fast as it was. It had full instrumentation, bold racing stripes, and a taut suspension that kept it planted through corners. At the 1968 Bathurst 500, the Monaro GTS 327 dominated. It finished first, second, and third, though one was later disqualified. Bruce McPhee took the win, giving Holden its first ever Bathurst victory. In 1969, the company took things further with the HT Monaro GTS 350. It packed a larger 350 cubic inch V8 with 300 horsepower. This extra power gave it a top speed of around 130 miles per hour on Conrod Straight. At Bathurst, it faced stiff competition from Ford's new GTHO Falcons. Tyre problems slowed the Fords, allowing Colin Bond and Tony Roberts to take victory in a Monaro GTS 350. To race at Bathurst, at least 250 road-going versions had to be built. Holden likely made around 500 to 600 of both the HK GTS 327 and the HT GTS 350. These cars weren't just for the track, they became dream machines for Australian drivers who wanted to own a piece of racing history. 3. Ford Falcon GTHO Phase 3. By 1971, the muscle car was at its peak, and Ford delivered the most powerful machine yet. The Falcon GTHO Phase 3 was built for one reason: to win Bathurst. Its 351 cubic inch Cleveland V8 was officially rated at 300 horsepower, but real figures were closer to 360 to 390. Stiffer suspension, a front spoiler, and a race-focused HO handling option package turned it into a serious track weapon. Top speed was crucial at Mount Panorama, and Ford made sure the Phase 3 had an edge. With a 3.25-to-1 final drive ratio, it could reach 140 miles per hour on Conrod Straight. That was shocking at the time. Newspapers ran story about its speed, and politicians started worrying about supercars on public roads. At Bathurst in 1971, the Phase 3 delivered an unforgettable performance. Alan Moffat drove his factory-backed car to victory, leading a first, second, third sweep for Ford. The sight of the Falcon crossing the line, a full lap ahead of its nearest rival, became part of Australian racing history. Number 4. Chrysler Valiant Charger RT E49. In 1972, Chrysler Australia built a car that could take on the big V8s at Bathurst. The Valiant Charger RT E49 was the fastest six-cylinder muscle car of its time, proving that power wasn't just about how many cylinders you had. It looked tough with its wide stance and bold colours, but the real magic was under the hood. Instead of a heavy V8, Chrysler went with a high-revving 265 cubic inch Hemi straight 6. With triple Weber carburetors, it made 302 horsepower in race trim, the most ever from an Australian 6 at the time. The E49 was built for endurance. Unlike the earlier E38 model, which only had a 3-speed gearbox, this one came with a close-ratio 4-speed manual for better acceleration. It also had an optional 40-gallon fuel tank designed for Bathurst. On paper, the Charger was a weapon. It could do 0 to 60 miles per hour in just 6.1 seconds, a record for an Australian production car that stood for 27 years. At Bathurst in 1972, the E49 lined up against Holden's Torana GTR XU1 and Ford's GTHO Falcon. It had raw speed, but Bathurst isn't just about horsepower. The lighter Toranas handled better and used less fuel, which gave them an advantage in the rain-soaked race. The Chargers also ran into mechanical issues in pit stops. Even with these setbacks, an E49 still finished third, proving it had serious pace. Number 5. Holden Torana GTR XU1. The Holden Torana GTR XU1 proved that you didn't need a huge engine to win races. In 1970, Holden's racing legend Harry Firth took the small Torana, fitted it with a 186 cubic inch straight 6, and turned it into a lightweight performance machine. By 1972, the car had evolved into the LJ GTR XU1 with a bigger 202 cubic inch engine, making 190 horsepower. It had front disc brakes, a close ratio 4-speed, and a few aerodynamic tweaks to keep it stable at high speeds. Compared to Ford's big GTHO Falcon, the Torana was tiny, but it was quick through corners and easier on fuel. At Bathurst in 1972, the Torana faced off against the Falcons and Chargers. While the V8s had more power, the Torana had a secret weapon: Peter Brock. At just 27 years old, Brock drove solo for all 500 miles. The race was held in terrible weather, and while the bigger cars struggled on the wet track, Brock kept the Torana under control. He didn't just win, he made history. It was a turning point in Australian motorsport, proving that a smart, well-balanced car could beat sheer horsepower. Holden's marketing team jumped on the victory. By Monday, the Torana GTR XU1s were flying out of showrooms. A total of 1,667 LC and LJ XU1s were built. These cars weren't just for racing. They were affordable and fun to drive, making them a favourite among young enthusiasts. The XU1 continued to dominate even after its Bathurst win. In 1974, Peter Brock won the Australian Touring Car Championships in one. It remained competitive until rule changes allowed V8s in smaller cars. 6. Ford Falcon XA XB GT hardtops. By the mid-1970s, the muscle car was changing. Government pressure on high-performance road cars forced manufacturers to back down. Ford had been working on the GTHO Phase 4, but it was cancelled before it could hit the track. Instead, Ford introduced the Falcon XA GT hardtop in 1973. This two-door coupe looked like something from NASCAR, but it was built for Bathurst. Without strict homologation rules, Ford focused on key performance parts like bigger fuel tanks, large Holley carburetors, and wider wheels. The XA GT still had a 351 cubic inch Cleveland V8, making 300 horsepower, paired with a 4-speed manual and a tough race-ready chassis. Despite its size, the Falcon proved it could win. Alan Moffat took an XA GT hardtop to victory at Bathurst in 1973. showing that Ford was still a force to be reckoned with. In 1974, privateer John Goss won again in an XA, battling through heavy rain to take an unexpected victory. The Falcon hardtops were heavier than Holden's Toranas, but their endurance and brute strength kept them competitive. The most legendary moment for these cars came in 1977. Ford had moved on to the XC Falcon hardtop, and Alan Moffat and Colin Bond were leading the Bathurst 1000 with a comfortable gap over their rivals. The two Falcons lined up side by side on Conrod Straight in a dramatic formation finish, taking first and second place. It was a perfect ending to the Falcons' dominance at Bathurst. 7. Holden Torana SL R5000 L34. By 1974, the battle between Holden and Ford was at full throttle. Ford had its big Falcon GTHOs, but Holden wasn't about to back down. Instead of going bigger, they went smarter. They took their mid-sized Torana, already a tough little street fighter, and gave it V8 power. The result was the LH Torana SLR 5000, a compact four-door sedan with a 308 cubic inch V8 under the hood. It was quick, but in the heat of endurance racing, it showed its weak points. Holden needed something tougher. Enter the SLR 5000 L34, a proper homologation special built to survive Bathurst. This wasn't just a badge upgrade. The L34 had serious hardware under the skin. Holden strengthened the engine with forged pistons, a high-lift cam, big valve heads, and twin-point ignition. It got a heavy-duty clutch and gearbox, bigger brake rotors from the full-size HQ Holden, and bolt-on wheel arch flares to make room for wider racing tyres. Even the little details mattered. In simple terms, the L34 was a race car in street clothing. Some assembly required. Only 263 L34s were built for the road, just enough to satisfy the racing rulebook. They didn't come with wild stripes or massive spoilers, just small L34 badges and those muscular fender flares. To the untrained eye, it looked like a normal SLR 5000, but anyone who knew cars could tell this was something special. On the track, the L34 wasted no time making an impact. Peter Brock, already a rising star, won the final 2 rounds of the 1974 Australian Touring Car Championship in an L34. At Bathurst that year, the Toranas were blisteringly quick, but reliability issues cost Holden a victory. By 1975, those problems were ironed out. A privateer team, Gaunt Hindhoff, took an L34 to victory at Bathurst with Brock behind the wheel. That same year, Holden won the Manufacturers' Championship, winning all 4 out of 5 rounds. The L34 was proving its worth. In 1976, Bathurst delivered one of its most dramatic finishes. A privately entered L34, driven by Bob Morris and John Fitzpatrick, crossed the line first despite struggling with a failing differential and a gearbox seal about to let go. The Torana barely held together, but it got the job done. That was the story of the L34 in a nutshell. Fast but fragile. It had the speed to win, but broken axles and gearbox issues were common. Number 8. Holden Torana. By the late 1970s, Holden needed a stronger Torana to take on Ford at Bathurst. The result was the LX Torana A9X, a race-focused version of the SS hatchback and SLR 5000 sedan. It fixed all the weak points of the earlier L34 model. The biggest chance was a new heavy-duty Salisbury rear end with disc brakes, a first for the Torana. It also had better suspension, a working hood scoop for more airflow, and space for bigger fuel tanks. The 5-litre V8 still made 250 horsepower, but the A9X was lighter and tougher, making it faster and more reliable. Holden built 405 of them, 305 sedans and 100 hatchbacks. Racers loved the hatch because it gave them quick access to the rear axle for fast gear changes during long races. On the track, the A9X quickly became a legend. In 1978, Peter Brock and Jim Richards won Bathurst by more than a lap. But that was nothing compared to what happened in 1979. That year, Brock and Richards completely dominated. They won Bathurst by 6 laps, the biggest margin in history. Just to prove the car was unbeatable, Brock set the fastest lap of the race on his very last lap. No one could touch the A9X. It also won back-to-back Australian Touring Car Championships in 1978 and 1979. People used to say the A9X only lost when it broke, and even that was rare. The A9X was also a road car, but not an easy one to buy. It was expensive, and some sat in dealerships for months. A few were even converted back to standard trim to sell them. Today, they are some of the most valuable Aussie muscle cars. One sold for over $500,000 at auction. Number 9. Holden Commodore SS VK. By 1985, Australian racing rules had changed. The wild Group C cars were gone, replaced by international Group A regulations. To race, companies had to build at least 500 identical road cars. Holden's answer was the VK Commodore SS Group A. It was painted in bright Formula Blue and quickly earned the nickname Blue Meanie. It had a 5-litre V8 with better cylinder heads, a race-tuned exhaust, and a close-ratio 5-speed gearbox. A bigger fuel tank helped for endurance racing. The body had a deeper front air dam, a trunk spoiler, and a more aerodynamic grille. It wasn't as aggressive looking as the old Toranas, but it was built to win. On the track, it didn't take long to prove itself. Peter Brock won the 1985 Bathurst 1000 in a VK Group A, though that victory was later taken away due to a technical issue. In 1986, Alan Grice and Graham Bailey drove an HDT-built VK Commodore to Bathurst victory, beating the international teams. Brock even took the car to Europe, racing at Spa and Silverstone to prove that an Aussie-built V8 could compete on the world stage. By 1987, Ford and Nissan were pushing the limits with turbocharged race cars, but the VK still had one last moment of glory. That year at Bathurst, Brock finished third, but after the 2 Ford Sierras ahead of him were disqualified, he was officially declared the winner. That gave the VK Group A another Bathurst title and kept Holden in the fight. For buyers, the Blue Meanie was a raw performance car with a simple interior, but that didn't matter. It was a Bathurst winner, directly connected to Brock's racing success. All 500 cars sold out fast, and today they are highly collectible. 10. Holden VL Commodore SS. By the late 1980s, Australian touring cars were dominating the turbocharged European machines like the Ford Sierra RS 500 and Nissan Skyline GTR. Holden needed something special to keep up. The answer was the 1988 VL Commodore SS Group A SV, better known as the Walkinshaw Commodore, built by the newly formed Holden Special Vehicles HSV with Tom Walkinshaw Racing. It was unlike anything Holden had made before. Its design was shocking. The Walkinshaw had one of the wildest body kits ever seen on an Australian car. A long aerodynamic nose, hood scoops, and a massive rear wing. Every part was tested in a wind tunnel to make the car faster on the track. Underneath, it was just as advanced. It was the first Holden V8 to have fuel injection, with twin throttle bodies helping it produce 241 horsepower. Holden originally planned to build 500 cars, but demand seemed strong, so they made an extra 250. Ironically, those cars sat in showrooms for years because the $45,000 price tag and futuristic styling were too much for some buyers. On the track, the Walkinshaw Commodore debuted in 1988 and helped Holden stay competitive. It couldn't immediately beat the turbo cars, but it held its own. In the 1990 Bathurst 1000, the Holden Racing Team's VL Commodore was the fastest Holden, qualifying in the top 10 and finishing third behind a Nissan and a Ford Sierra. Public opinion in 1988 was mixed. Some loved the futuristic look, while others mocked it as plastic fantastic. But over time, its racing success and rarity made it a prized collector's car. By the 2000s, prices had skyrocketed. One pristine example sold for over $300,000, and the actual 1990 Bathurst winning race car went for about $500,000. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like as that really helps us. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel.